Hi, I am Jessica Darmoni here at FIA Boca. Dr. Jessica Hehmeyer, founder of Well Empowered, is joining us here at FIA Boca. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's such a pleasure to be here with you.
Your approach is data-driven and root cause forward. Tell me a little bit about how you came to practice with this approach and how it differs from conventional wisdom.
Through my own journey and seeing that some of the health challenges I was dealing with weren't being addressed by a traditional approach. Now, a traditional approach does many, many great things, but for me, when it came to my energy levels, my digestion, my weight, the traditional approach wasn't finding the answers I was looking for, right? All of my labs were quote unquote normal, but it was clear to me there was something else going on undercover. So as I got to work and began learning myself and coming up with answers for my health, I got very committed to be able to provide the same for others. Ultimately, that led me back to grad school to get a few graduate degrees and to be able to do what I do now.
Can you talk a little bit about some of the issues that you see, common themes, just challenges that are frequented with your clients?
Oftentimes it can be, they're waking up in their 40s, maybe moving towards their 50s, and suddenly they realize that their health is a place that it wasn't before in the past. And so they're dealing with energy struggles. They're dealing with challenges in focusing. They feel like their hormones are out of balance, whether it's a man or a woman. Digestive distress, or maybe just really struggling with weight in a way they hadn't in the past. So those are some of the common things that when I work with people, we get to work in identifying the root cause, what's going on physiologically that's at the source of their symptoms.
How do things like sleep, blood sugar regulation, stress, resilience affect cognitive performance and decision making?
Sleep really is our body's superpower. And, I don't know how it was for you, but for me in my 20s into my 30s, there was a period where I just, I kind of thought it was great that I didn't need as much sleep until one day I realized I really did, But that sleep, when we sleep, it's when our body takes out the trash, in our brain especially. There's a system in our brain called the glymphatic system. And just like we have the lymphatic system from our neck down, we have the glymphatic system going on in our brain, and it's most active when we sleep. So if we're not sleeping well, we're not taking out the trash well, and that means that neurological repair's not happening as well as it ought to. So we're not going to produce neurotransmitters the way we should or receive their messages, two different parts of that equation. So if we just start with sleep alone, there's just, a whole world of impact we can have on our cognitive function, our ability to focus, our energy at large. Moving on to blood sugar stability. When we're on this blood sugar roller coaster, which happens when our blood sugar goes up really quickly. That happens typically when we're fueling ourselves with simple carbohydrates like bread or pasta or white rice in large quantities, or high sugary things, whether it's from a sugary beverage or from a super sweet meal. Our blood sugar goes up really quickly. Our body doesn't like that, so we produce insulin in order to handle the situation that helps bring the blood sugar down, but then it goes too low, and when it's too low, we have struggle focusing, we feel cranky, we feel really, really hungry for things that are going to bring our blood sugar up real quickly, which are the exact things that got us in that situation to begin with.
What are some physiological patterns you commonly discover in patients struggling with energy, weight, low libido, or focus?
A few things. One is oftentimes we see underlying nutrient deficiencies or insufficiencies, right? Deficiencies and insufficiencies are a little different in the sense that someone can be lab normal, but it might not be optimal for their body. And so oftentimes we'll discover this through the lab testing that we do. We can see it's a little bit like looking at how much fuel does this body need need rather than how much fuel does an average body need, right? There's some individuality to that. So we can see that with the nutrients. So nutrient deficiencies and insufficiencies often undercover and gone unrecognized. Another common pattern that I see is elevated inflammation, right? Elevated inflammation, sometimes people will come to me and they'll say, oh, I feel really inflamed, and I'll ask them how it's showing up. They might say, my joints hurt, or my skin's red, or I'm bloated. But more often than not, inflammation will be elevated and people won't even know it. And when that inflammation is elevated, it's going to interfere with everything. It's going to interfere with healthy energy production. It's going to interfere with your brain working well, that neurotransmitter production and receiving the message. So that inflammation, we can test it, and then when we test it, we can address it.
If you could measure only 3 biometrics to understand someone from a long-term health perspective, what would they be?
The first one I'm going to speak to is that inflammation, because that inflammation, not only is it a problem for people, kind of like right now if it's elevated, but also it's fertilizer for everything under the sun we don't want, whether that's cancer or heart disease or diabetes. That elevated inflammation is a real problem, cognitive decline, and we can measure that with something called HSCRP, high sensitivity C-reactive protein, and we want that HSCRP to be 1.5 or less. And it's a simple blood test, right? You can ask your GP to have it completed at your annual. But for me, that's a really important marker that everyone should have on their kind of health dashboard, what they're looking at on a regular basis. Another thing is fasting insulin. So fasting insulin, it's related to blood sugar management and diabetes from a disease standpoint, but oftentimes what we'll see is that suboptimal range of fasting insulin. Lab normal can be up to 18 depending on a lab. I want to see that at 7 or less, because we know when fasting insulin creeps up beyond 7, that's when real problems start to arise. That's when we're starting to see signs of insulin resistance and everything that goes with it. So that fasting insulin's a big one. A third one is homocysteine. So homocysteine is a marker of what I'd call methylation. And what's so great about methylation is it helps your genes express themselves to the best of their ability. So I like to see this homocysteine between 6 and 8. Again, some labs will give you some wiggle room up to like 13, but that sweet spot for homocysteine is 6 to 8.
If someone is watching this interview and wants to take one step today to improve their long-term health, what would you say that is?
Where I would invite everyone to start is where you are right now. And what I mean by that is everyone listening to this is coming to this conversation with a different body, with different symptoms, with different genes, and with a different health history and in a different intended health future. So to start where you are, to me, means, first of all, get very clear on what your desire is for your intended health future, right? Because it might be very different than the trajectory you're headed on, right? And to first be clear on your North Star, where you intend to go, that's the place to begin. And then from there, work backwards and start to look at what is one small change I could make today, right? We live in a culture that really embraces the all or nothing approach, this kind of passing the hot potato of overindulgence deprivation, and it really just doesn't serve anyone. And oftentimes people throw themselves into that deprivation world because they just don't know there's another option out there. And to me, there is one, and I'd call that your middle ground, mastering your middle ground. And where that begins is simply by taking one step that's going to make a difference for you that you can continue taking daily. That might be something as simple as starting your day with a breakfast or a first meal, if you skip breakfast, that stabilizes your blood sugar, starting there. Or for someone else, it might be simply, oh my goodness, I'm not moving my body at all. This week, I'm gonna start by getting 3 10-minute walks at some point, right? So the big thing is start where you are and then build upon it over time. And if you don't have the answers you're looking for, know there are people like me and out there, myself and others, who would be totally delighted to guide you in your journey.
Thank you for that. Yes. It sounds like consistency is the most important.
I'm just a real champion for all of you listening, manifesting your best health so you can live the life you intend.
Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.